Welcome back to the Purpose Over Profit podcast. This week you have me. I'm going to be talking all things goal setting. It's that time of year where we all like to take some time, or most of us like to take some time, reflect what's gone well, what's not, and then start to make those New Year's resolutions. But inevitably, by the middle of January, your gym membership's been cancelled. You've managed to stop smoking for a couple of weeks, and we've fallen back into the same old patterns. So why not listening to this episode? I'm going to take you through a book I've been using for the last 6 years. It's called Your Best Year Yet by Jinny Ditzler. It is a fantastic process, the most comprehensive process I've ever been through, and it takes you through 10 questions that you can cover in a 3-hour workshop, and helps you really unpick both the good and the bad from what's going on in your life right now, what's happened in the past year. Helps you explore how you're stopping yourself, how are you holding yourself back, and then really gets you focused on understanding the key roles in your life, the priority for next year for you to focus on, and practically how can you go out there and make that happen. So listen, this is probably the most workshop action-packed sort of episode we've had on the podcast, and I'm sure you're going to take lots of value from it. Remember, if you like the episode, please share with a friend and give us a review as well. If you're on iTunes, give us a 5-star review. We would always very, very, very much appreciate that, so we can reach more people like you.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the Purpose Over Profit podcast. This week it's just Darren and I. We're going to be talking about your best year yet, how you can make 2022 your best year yet. Darren, how are you?
Yeah, I'm really good, mate, and I'm excited about sharing this. I can't believe we've not spoken about it this year, but it seems crazy to let it go past at this time of year when everyone's thinking about goal setting, and for me not to be talking about a book I've used for the last 5-6 years, and genuinely believe that it's created the next year has been better than the one before. So it's kind of incrementally got better, which is phenomenal.
Well, I'm excited as well because bizarrely, like obviously I was on one of your webinars. I think you were talking about this book. It was a good few months back actually. Yeah. I bought the book with a few other books. So this is one of 4 books I'd bought, and this was number 2 on my list. I finished one and I started it last night, and I'm on page 52 of it, which talks about goals. So I'm really excited about this. This is going to be a kind of a whirlwind for me as well to kind of understand it a bit better, because for me, I started thinking about goals for next year, and I want to kind of get ahead of the game, and I love this concept. So yeah, where do we start?
So I'm going to run through basically a quick insight into it. The premise behind the book is there's 10 questions. So there's a bit of introspection, a bit of reflection. Well, there's a lot of reflection, and then there's a lot of kind of what I would say is reductive questioning of how do you distill all that information from the reflections into how do you move forward in the next year? How do you set your goals?
Excellent.
To make it your best year yet. So I do a lot of goal setting. I kind of use this largely as a framework. I dig into some of the elements of it a little bit deeper than what she does, but this is the best value for money book I have ever bought. So if there's any bigger statement to you, I'd get this book. It's very, very cheap. I think you can pick it up a used copy for a few quid from Amazon or anywhere else. We'll put a link in the show notes so you can maybe have a look at it, but I'd highly recommend it. Your Best Year Yet by Jinny Ditzler. So the 10 questions, effectively there's a book and then there's a workshop that you carry out at the back end, and the workshop takes about 3 hours. So I'm going to run through the 10 questions and give you just a potted summary of what they mean and what you're looking for. And Chris, you might have picked up on some of this if you're already working through it. So the first thing is about starting from a positive. There's a psychological benefit from doing so, because when you focus on a positive element, you give yourself a little bit of energy, a bit of momentum, you feel good, you want to progress. So we're not looking at all the shit things that we didn't get done over the year. We're looking back over the last year and thinking about what did we accomplish, and really digging deep on that so that we can feel likely we're going to feel a lot more positive after having that reflection. We're going to recognize way more things that we've actually done when we've given it genuine thought. So this is maybe taken 15, 20 minutes to just write down and reflect upon all the things that really went well through the year. What did you accomplish? Because as from a psychology point of view, our brains are always primed to look for what's not gone well, where the danger is, where we've fallen short, because primarily we're driven by fear, right? We think that, oh, we've not done something and we're going to get caught out. There's an event round the corner that's going to catch us out. And therefore, see if we just sit and take that time to think all of the things that we did do, the clouds can kind of part for a little bit. We can start to see a bit more clearly and appreciate all the value that we've brought over the year. And this isn't a business book. This isn't a, I guess it is quite a coachy type book, but it's not about what did you accomplish in your job? What did you accomplish in your relationship? It's every component of your life. All right. So it's not just about one area. It could be that you got a new partner. It could be that you got married. It could be that you moved into a new home. It could be you got a new job, or you accomplished some projects at work you were really proud of. It could be that you supported a charity for the first time and felt really positive about that. So honestly, absolutely any area of your life, you want to be thinking firstly about your accomplishments. All right.
That sounds fantastic. And actually, like I said, I started last night, so I've read the intro when she talks about how she's done it. And was it 1980 she started it? And she started thinking about 1980, 1981, she started writing it, and then all of a sudden she had these goals that were in it. And bizarrely, Darren, you try and keep me up on this. Every podcast seems to do that. One of her goals for the first year, she said, was to run a marathon. And that clicked a wee thing in my head thinking about that.
Well, actually, I don't know. Did you see what I tagged you in the other night?
I haven't. No, I haven't.
So I tagged you on Facebook. Your man, David Goggins. Do you know him?
No.
Stay hard. David Goggins, stay hard. So he does a 4x4 mile, 4x4 by 48 challenge. So you've got to run 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours.
That's good.
All right. So it's not a marathon, but you're going to be doing more than a marathon if you're doing that.
What I was going to show you was briefly, I know we're on the podcast, but last night I was looking at, if you can see this.
Yeah, Ironman. Oh man, yeah, you keep talking about this.
I was looking at half Ironman last night, but anyway, let's jump back to your book.
Cool. Well, yes. So yeah, accomplishments. That's what you want to focus on first. Feel good about what you've done. The second thing is to be really honest with yourself about what you're disappointed about. What are the things that drove your disappointment in the year? All right. And similarly, you want to give it enough time so that you focus on all areas of your life. And you really pull out those elements that emotionally you kind of make you feel not great about falling short across the year. All right. And then that really links on quite well to 3. Can
I just talk? So obviously you've got number 1, which is what did you accomplish, which is all the positive stuff. Then where's my biggest disappointment? So what kind of examples of your biggest disappointments might they be? Because obviously you mentioned you got a new partner, maybe. I've seen in this book, it might be a new job, but what would the biggest disappointments be, for an example?
Usually it's about falling short of where you expected you were going to be. So say you'd set goals, and certainly if you're a high achiever or if you're into goal setting in general, usually it's like not achieving a goal. So this year, for example, if I have a look at it, I mean, I'm not massively disappointed by it when I go through this exercise, but I wanted to grow my Purpose to Progress community to 1,000 members. All right. That was important to me to build a community. If I think about it, it wasn't that, and that's just one goal that I had. I'm about halfway there. We've got about 500 members. And part of me is like, it is what it is. But kind of it helps me identify, well, why am I disappointed because I've fallen short of that? And emotionally, like what is it about that makes me disappointed? So it's not just the fact that you're disappointed. It's like, oh, I've not achieved that. It's like, why? Well, in that one, it's like, well, I set a challenge and I didn't do what I needed to get there. And it's important for me to reach people with my message. I think that that's important, and I think I can help more people. So there are some reasons why I'd be like emotionally or rationally disappointed by that. That's the important bit from it.
Okay.
So it could be, if I'm thinking about other people, it could be you didn't get a promotion through the year, or it could be that you were made redundant through the year.
Yeah, it could even be, I guess, people have weight issues.
Weight issues broke up. I said I was going to get in the gym this year, so it was like, when I turned 40 a few years ago, I was like, I want to be fitter at 40 than I've ever been. All right, so I've got a bit of a challenge that I'm going to be turning 40 at some point next year. Not quite as old as you, mate, but yeah, how do I go and manage that? So that's important to me.
It's interesting. When I first read, I've seen the questions in front of me. We're going to go through them. So I quite like the concept of, set it up positive at first. What are my biggest accomplishments? Really positive, but then it's really been quite honest and quite scared with yourself to say, what is my biggest disappointment that's happened that year?
Yeah, being vulnerable enough to say, like, just be really honest. She sets it up actually really well. I kind of take this for granted a little bit, but it can be quite hard sometimes for some people to peel back some of this stuff and go, because we feel like we've got this mask on when we go out, and all of us have a mask on when we go out into public to a greater or lesser extent, and see if we can kind of take that mask off and be really vulnerable and honest with ourselves about where we fell short and why. That's the important bit. All right. So I say 2 and 3 go together very, very closely, because I do this as a weekly exercise. I always talk about what went well, what didn't. And then the third thing, and it's the third question in here, is what did I learn? I don't want to dwell and sit in my disappointment. It doesn't feel good. But if I can move from disappointment into learnings, in the same way that I was describing, like, so say if you never got a job, the job offer this, and that's what you're really disappointed about. Well, what learnings did you take from it? Did you get any feedback from the interview? Was there anything that came up from a shortcoming point of view that you were able to go and work on? Like, maybe you needed a bit more experience in leadership or leading teams. Okay, so how can you go and start to do that? The idea from the disappointments into learning is you want to feel the emotion of the disappointment and be really vulnerable and honest with yourself. But then you need to quickly move from that place. You don't want to sit down there and lie down in it. You want to move from that place into a place of empowerment and a place of, right, okay, so I've taken something from it, and therefore I'm glad I've almost had that disappointment, because then I can learn the lesson and I can start to do something differently about it today. So you want to really peel away the learning. So for the job interview, there might be umpteen different things that you might need to do to get that promotion. It might also be, do I want that? Do I want to work with this company anymore? Should I look to move companies? Yeah. Do I feel like I'm underappreciated? If you're disappointed by it, is there something you can do to change that? Or should you look for other opportunities elsewhere? And often when we are disappointed by something, we'll feel that we're in a place of victim, a victim mentality. This happened to me. I actually used the phrase there, you might have been made redundant. Well, you could say I got made redundant, but I don't. I say I chose redundancy. I didn't say I was made redundant. Something happened to me. I took redundancy. All right.
No,
right? And it's a way to reframe things. So what do you want to do is kind of is look to see how you can move yourself out of a victim mentality into an empowerment state. And that's usually the reason we stay there. It's like it stops us from taking any sort of action. So you want to take the learnings from it so you can actually start to feel empowered to make some changes.
And I can see why this is now a 3-hour workshop, because you're going through this process, I'm imagining. And like you mentioned, you don't want to dwell in that scenario where you're thinking, what's my disappointment? Because if you have that victim mentality mindset where everything's somebody else's problem or it's your fault, then you're going to dwell in that for too long. What you need to do is pick yourself up quickly, like you say, take those learnings and map them out quickly, because if you don't map them out quickly, you'll end up getting lost and you'll dwell on it for too long. I think that's really positive, and I can see it in the book, even at the start, which I read, she talks about the framing concept of how you frame a problem as well. You can be a victim, but you can turn it around, turn it into a positive action as well. So I think that's really crucial for you to read the introduction. I think this is fantastic. So we've covered what did I accomplish?
So what did I accomplish? Yeah. What were my biggest disappointments of the year? What did I learn? Yeah. What were my biggest learnings of the year? So some of them things as well. So whilst I've kind of said 2 and 3 go together, the learnings don't have to just be about disappointments. But naturally, I think we learn more from our disappointments and perceived failures than we do about our accomplishments. But sometimes your learning could be, do you know what? Like, I launched my first property mastermind, a couple of months ago, and it sold out quickly. And it was like, well, what was I learning from that? Well, how did I sell that so quickly? Like, what did I do? Remember that, capture it, use that again in the future. That could be a really good. So some of your accomplishments, like success leaves clues, capture those clues and make sure that you're going to use them again in the future.
Nice. Their success leaves clues. I like that. Fantastic.
It's not mine. So yeah.
So let's jump on to number 4 then. This is exciting.
Number 4 is even getting deeper still. So this is probably where you're talking about reframing, paradigm shifts. How do I limit myself and how can I stop? How do I limit myself and how can I stop? So this is all about, again, being really honest with yourself about your disappointments, what did you learn? Some of those learnings might be ways that you limited yourself, okay? So let's say we'll stick with this analogy that you went for a job promotion and you didn't get it. And you took some learnings that you were told you stopped short of that. You didn't have the experience, or there was people in a better position than you to get that job, and ultimately you didn't get it. So you're disappointed. But how do you limit yourself? Well, it might actually, it forces you to take responsibility for the disappointment that you had, whether it was actually your fault or not. Because a victim mentality doesn't help you move forward. A victim mentality will keep you in that state and feeling disempowered to change it. This happened to me. No one ever gives me an opportunity. That type of thinking, yeah? So how do I limit myself? It could be that individual, doesn't speak up in meetings. All right, doesn't take on additional responsibility. All right, so they might recognize I'm hesitant to speak up in, when it's there's a team meeting or a leadership meeting, she doesn't feel confident enough to speak up and be heard. Okay, so that people in that meeting might be looking at, that she doesn't have the leadership, he or she doesn't have the leadership traits to effectively step up into that bigger role. So it's trying to unpick those learnings into areas or behaviors that you might limit yourself that might prevent you getting the action that you need. And how can you stop that?
There's something here where I've kind of seen a bit of a pattern between this as well. So I know you've taken the example of the job interview, which you can then see, okay, what was the problem? What was an issue? How am I limiting myself? And I can see the next one coming up. But I can understand then that there's elements where you're putting the onus on yourself to say, how can I stop? You're switching that mindset, you're reframing, like you said as well, from the victim to actually being an active partner in your own life to say that I'm going to actually be able to challenge this going forward. How can I stop? Because it's a very different terminology than this has happened to me. How can I stop that? Because most people will just be quite passive in that way.
Yeah, I mean, there's also things like, so something that affected me over the last year is imposter syndrome. Is like, who am I to be a coach? Who am I to be talking about this? Who am I to be helping people from a property perspective? Like, and there's loads of, like, let's be honest, there's loads of dicks out there that are on social media that are people that will be even friends of yours that will be open to criticize you for expressing an opinion or looking to better yourself. There's loads of criticism out there. So we can kind of end up with a mindset of we are in a victim state. We're not worthy of success. It could be I didn't feel like I deserved to get the job. Maybe I don't deserve it. Well, that's quite a limiting belief. Yeah, and therefore reframing something into, and it's not, this is, sometimes people get reframing wrong. They think that you're trying to like lie to your brain or lie to the world, fake it till you make it. It's not that whatsoever. So reframing is about taking something which is disempowering and moving it into something that is empowering. So for example, it could be like, oh, I always get really nervous when I speak. I get tongue-tied every time that I speak in front of other leaders in the business. Right, okay. So that's a limiting belief. That's fine. You can unpick that. Like, why is that? What's the drivers? How would you want it to be? You can pattern interrupt, which is like throw a different thought in there, all right, to balance out the negative thoughts. Because when you're sat in the meeting, people talk about, we had Alex Witz on, actually. He's on the podcast. He was on the podcast last week. And he was saying, you know, you can control your thoughts. You can't control your thoughts completely, but you can feed additional thoughts into your head. All right. If I'm sat there and I feel nervous, I haven't asked for that thought to come in. But what I can do is reframe what I get from that sensation. Like, I feel butterflies in my stomach. Right. I can say, oh, this is nerves. This is excitement. This is energy. This is priming me to perform. This means this is important to me. And this is where you'll see athletes talk about, I'm not nervous, I'm excited. It's the exact same. Are you nervous about playing the number 1 seed tomorrow? No, I'm just really excited to test myself against the top player in the game. That's how the top athletes think. That's just a reframe. That's all that is. He's not lying, because the exact same emotion of nerves is excitement. The difference is about how does he frame that in his mind. I had a client I worked with I'm working with just now, who says that they really struggle when they're in group situations or having, you know, conversations about money particularly. So his limiting belief is like, oh, I just can't talk about that. I get tongue-tied and flustered and I just go off track. Okay. So one reframe for you could be, I am working harder and I'm getting better at talking to people about money. How can you reinforce that on an ongoing basis? And that's going to be a lot more beneficial for you and balance out this feeling that's kind of there around your kind of negative mindset. So I look at it as a bit of a tug of war. You've got a limiting belief on one side, and you've got this reframe, this picture of the person that you want to be, and how you would like it to be. You want to loosen the grip on the negative belief, the limiting belief, and that element of how you can stop, and that paradigm shift to where you want to be. You want to tighten the grip of that, and you want to kind of almost force those positive thoughts and affirmations into your brain as often and, you know, as possible. So yeah, that's quite a meaty question. How do I limit myself and how can I stop? And it can take a lot of time and vulnerability just to unpick those limitations.
I'm glad you finished off with that, because I've got a couple of notes here which you mentioned, unpicking the vulnerability, and I guess there might be some psychological things going on there with issues of the past, issues that's happened to them. You talk about the limiting beliefs they might have as well in the future, but I guess with all of that, I mean, we've talked around those 4 kind of points so far about the biggest disappointments, but it's not really, there's digging, but there's not a lot of digging deeper. So what's the biggest disappointments? You might just kind of gloss over that, put a couple of big ones in there, but when you get to those kind of, how do I limit myself? That is really digging deep. That can be, I mean, for a 3-hour workshop to try and get that out of somebody could be quite tough, I'd imagine, as well, because that would take a lot of coaching at times. And I'm not saying coaching, because you really need to understand and listen to them, start to unpick bits and get right to the core of what's going on there. Because if you don't, then you really will be set up to fail, because you might end up just moving on thinking, I've covered that one. Actually, a limiting belief might be the lady you mentioned in the meeting doesn't want to speak up. Maybe that's because when she was a child, she was always getting told it's better to be seen and not heard.
Yeah,
and that stuff as well. And she's got some issues with her parents or whatever else, family and all this kind of stuff. But you really need to dig deep to understand it. And if you don't dig deep, you won't get that far. I mean, I guess, I mean, obviously you cover that and stuff you do, but is that kind of how you see it? You need to really dig that further deep to kind of understand it?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it doesn't need to be that deep. If you're used to the process as well. So Jinny Ditzler, like, she calls it like a 3-hour workshop. It's probably never taken 3 hours from, like, me and Joe will do the workshop together. And it usually takes us way more than 3 hours. We usually do it over a few nights, to be honest, or a few sessions. But yeah, it doesn't always, that element is, once you're used to that. So I reflect every week about things that have not gone well and what have I learned. So generally I'm pretty comfortable and honest with, and it comes to me quite quickly. If I'm getting to the end of the year, like, I know the answer to that question. Do you know what I mean? How do I limit myself? So I've got a limitation about shouting about myself. You might see, some people might go, like, you're everywhere, you've got a podcast, you're on Instagram, whatever. I genuinely feel like I don't want to push too much content out and come across as preaching. That's a limitation that I've got. And that can stop people hearing a message that I think is really, really important. So I think if you track this stuff on an ongoing basis, right, and you're in tune with how you're feeling, how you're showing up, what's working, what's not working, how you could be better, you're probably not going to have to dig too deep, because you've kind of got that answer there. I mean, if you've never done this process before, then yeah, for sure it's going to feel more difficult and more strange for you, and you might need a bit of support to work through it.
No, I appreciate you sharing those kind of personal examples as well, because obviously you mentioned imposter syndrome. So obviously some of the biggest philanthropists out there have imposter syndrome. In fact, some of the biggest successful businesses have business people out there have imposter syndrome. The reason why they keep pushing the way they push is because they want to constantly prove themselves.
Yeah,
so I think that's fantastic. So yeah, that's amazing. So what is number 5?
5 is so I'll take 5 and 6 together. 5 is all about, like, what are your personal values, what are your personal core values, and 6 is what are your life roles. All right, what are the key roles in your life? So values, I love values work. Wouldn't even know what a personal value was up to 5 years ago. This is like a characteristic, a way of being, I guess, that is really bespoke to you. It's something which you hold dear to yourself. And I think Roy Disney actually said, like, making decisions, once you know your values, making decisions kind of becomes easy, or making decisions isn't hard. And that's so true, because they're like a compass to kind of direct the things that you want to do and how you want to do them. So talk about, like, values in your business. It's like, well, what are they? Like, I want to, like, for me, one of my big ones is belonging. So I've created a group. That's why, one of the reasons why I've got that goal that I mentioned to grow that community.
I can see something behind you. Was that say "I belong" on the green sign on top of your bookcase?
Oh, this is it's a quote from the Lumineers.
Oh, the Lumineers. I belong with you. I belong with you. You belong.
You belong with me. You're my sweetheart.
There you go.
There we go. So no, it's got nothing to do with that. Joe just chucked it in here.
No, but it's got relevance because he's talking about belonging. I love that as well. So
yeah, so but belonging is like a kind of key value for mine. So there's a process that I run. If I invite anyone that's listening to this, go onto my website, workandprogresscoaching.co.uk, check out my free resources. You've got a values workshop basically there that'll help you identify what your personal values are. I very, very much urge you to go and do that if you don't know what your values are. Because if you don't know the things that are most important to you, then when you're weighing key decisions in your life, or even minor decisions in your life, you do not know where to go. You could easily end up in a place where you don't want to be. So getting connected with your values kind of helps you understand who you are and why you are that way. So that's values. And they're very, very important about then mapping your direction, taking all your learnings and your new positive paradigms and shaping the next year to make it your best year. Life roles is another area which is really, really key. Often people will just think about 1 or 2 areas of their life that are not working, and that's where everything's everything isn't great. But life roles, I do like a wheel of life. Jinny Ditzler has the same thing in her book. And the wheel of life is effectively, if you draw a circle on a bit of paper, cut it into 8 segments, and on each line, just write what roles you play in your life. So for me, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a property investor, I'm a property mentor, I'm a transformational coach, I'm a friend, I'm a personal trainer. What else am I?
Basketball teammate.
What's that?
Basketball teammate.
So I mean that might come into like personal coach or sort of area. I'm a student, but typically we'll say there's like, you should have no more than 8. All right, if you've got more than 8, you can distill them down to having a maximum of 8, because we can kind of understand 8. You start to have like, I've got 15 roles, you've got too many, I can't think about 15 things. But 8 is kind of quite nice as a model. It keeps you aware of and has meaty enough goals that can be driven from those roles in your life. So that question 6 is all about identifying your key life roles, and having no more than 8, I would suggest, and really rating where you are. Like, how are you showing up? 2 questions I always ask when I run this exercise is, how are you showing up in each life role right now, and where do you want to be showing up? All right, and that usually, I mean, I'm moving on maybe a couple of questions here, but that will help you identify a couple of things. So you'll have like what's known as a spider graph around that circle. If you imagine that the center of the circle is 0 and the end of the circle is 10, for each of those roles, you'd be able to map out where you are currently now and how big the gap is to where you want to be. And often the areas that have got the largest gaps are the areas that you've got the most work that you need to do, or you at least feel like you've got the most work to do. So yeah, that's life roles. And then moving into question 7, that helps you identify what your main role is for the next year.
I think that's quite good to kind of hit a pause there for a wee second. So we've always talked about personal values, which everyone hopefully listens to the podcast who are motivated, understand business, or looking to either start a business, whatever else. Personal values are important because it understands where you kind of draw the line as well of who you want to work with in business as well. And it helps you understand exactly not even where your own work, your personal values are, but how that comes into your own work values and how that kind of leads into them. But then even in this, I love this piece about the life roles as well, because I've done your stuff as well, your exercises, which I found fantastic. I love the personal values. There was a couple of ones that jumped out, which I was surprised at, but it kind of reinforces ones I've done before. But even the life roles ones, actually getting that down on paper, because it really makes you think and actually consider it as a whole, because you give all your examples of all your ones you've done, and you've got to map it out, and you feel like you're shortchanging yourself, so you feel you should go beyond 8, but then you're right, you have to come back as well. And then when you do this, what do you call it, the spider graph, is that what you call it?
Yeah.
Wheel of life. And when you see that is quite a, I mean, you talk about visual stuff, that is quite a visual exercise to do. And it's actually visually can make you a bit emotional as well when you look at it, because you feel you're performing in all of these areas. And one you had and I had as a father or a husband as well. And if that goes to, say, you feel that at the moment because of your work life, you're maybe only performing in a 4, when you draw that out in a line, it's quite scary if you got it there, actually.
So that's like what a spider graph looks like for anyone on YouTube.
Yeah. Ideally, you want to have it go to the outer points. When you see that big gap, I had a big gap, couple of gaps in mine, and that reinforces it visually, because I'm a visual-led person, that how scary it is and how you really need to kind of be on top of that and focus on it. But no, I just thought it was good to pause there, because the roles is a really interesting piece in life, because you all think, basically, I'm a business owner and I'm a husband, but you dig deeper into that, which I found fantastic as well.
Yeah, there's so much more in there, and this is where, see if I'm working with someone that's a new dad, and I see this all the time, and I've experienced it myself, obviously. But you've got your wheel of life there, and then you've just shoehorned another role in there. Like, if you can imagine like that circle in is a good model for your life, right? So if you look at it, you can't expand it, like you maybe grow it out like that, but you can't just start adding extra bits to it. If you add an extra bit in, it's going to have a direct impact on other things in your life. So it applies context, and therefore it can allow you to be kind to yourself. So when you do this exercise, it's like, oh man, I'm not so good in this area, but the rest of my life is fantastic. So it can give you the kindness to say, actually, that feels really good. And you can also then question, like, how important is it? Like, so say you feel like you're a 2 or a 3 for one of the roles in your life. Well, how important is it that you're a 9 or a 10? If it's not that important, then that's cool. Like, where do you want to be? 4 or a 5? Like, I don't want to be you mentioned basketball there. I'm back playing basketball. Like, I want to be, it's important for me to get better. Like, it was last year I had a goal. Or 2 years ago before COVID hit, like, I wanted to start. I hadn't played for 18 years. And I achieved that goal within that short season that we had. But I can't remember where I was going with this. I think the main thing is, though, that you're in control of that up to a point, right? And I go, well, that's important to me, but I'm not going to be going and playing in the NBA, right? So I'm not wanting to be training 5 days a week to achieve that goal. It's important, but it's not the most important thing. And this is where I spoke about, it moves from that reflective and learnings element. And as you move on to the later questions, it's all about reductive kind of process where you're trying to narrow down your priorities. I'm not going to train 5 days a week because I've got to be a father. It's more important for me to be there for the kids and step up from a responsibility point of view, spend time with Joe as a husband as well. So you've got to get some element of context through the life role exercise so you can then prioritize.
And that's why I like what you mentioned. If you got more than 8, just combine a couple of them and actually look at it reflectively. And does that then take us nicely on to number 7?
Yeah, so main role for your next year, that is absolutely it. So from that, if you just ask yourself, I can't remember whether that's the 2 questions she asked in there, but the 2 questions I always find most helpful from your life roles exercises: how are you showing up now? Where do you want to be showing up next year? And that will generally dictate to you what your main role is going to be for the next year. Yeah. So we've probably read similar sort of books like The One Thing. You can only focus on one thing at one time. The word priority, there was no word priorities. We've butchered that word. Priority means the single thing. And now we've got, like, in big business, it's like, oh, but we can be more productive by having multiple priorities. So we can have multiple single things. As from a language point of view, we've completely, we've lost the context of that word. So because we can't focus on more than one thing at a time. I don't care whether you're man or female, like male or female, you can't. It's just, it is not possible. And the very best scenario is you're unproductive across both. All right. So this is about kind of really focusing your energy on an area of your life you really want to improve. That's not to say you forsake everything, but that you want to hang your hat on at this point. What's your main role for the next year? And be really clear about the reasons for that. So, because it may well have success in that in one area of your life will also have successes and a positive benefit across others. Sometimes it will have a detrimental impact. All right. So you need to be, if I said I wanted to be the best basketball player I possibly could, and that's the most important thing to me, I'm not going to be showing up as a dad as much. I'm not going to be showing up as a husband as much. This is where, like, classic cases like Tiger Woods. Who else? I think Eddie Hall is like world's strongest man. Like, he spoke openly about like being like he would be divorced and alone if he didn't win world's strongest man when he did, because of the toll it was taking and impact it was having on the rest of his life. So you need to be really clear right now about not only what your main role is, but why that's important, and see that for the context of what it might have across your other life roles. Because you might need to have a conversation with your partner. Listen, this is really important to me, and this is why. Is this something that you're able to support with? So like I would highly recommend if you're married or if you've got a long-term partner, like run this exercise together, because it helps you approach it from a problem-solving point of view, but it also allows you to have the support infrastructure in place where you can actually then go and put it into place. There's no good doing this in isolation, then going having a chat with your wife and going, well, I'm packing my bags. That's like, I'll see you later. And I'm assuming at this point, that's not what you wanted her to do.
You touched upon that. It is about collaboration, especially if you have a partnership or a relationship. If you're a business, it's different. Partner relationship, you need to. And especially like, I mean, I'm going to be doing this with my wife. My wife's not really into this kind of stuff, so it'll take a bit longer to kind of get through. But even just going back, I love that you mentioned priorities and you need to have one. It reminded me of a book that we are both maybe listened to or read, Deep Work.
Deep Work, yeah.
It highlights that as well. It talks around how you need
to... Newport.
There you go, fantastic. It just talks about if you try to do multiple tasks at once, you never get one thing done. You need to basically just allocate, I was going to say a time a day, but it's actually allocate a dedicated space, a dedicated time to focus on one thing and one thing only, and that's it. You shut out all other noise and go deep it as an age.
How did that not make our book list recommendation that we recorded?
It was on my list. We just never got to actually, but that's what it reminded me of that. And I think that's quite an important one when you talk about the kind of one key role in your life, what you want to focus on. But that's interesting. I've got the list in front of me, but what else do we go from there once you've got that key role focused on?
Once you've got the main role for the next year, then it's like look at all your roles and look at what your top goals are for each role.
Okay.
So I maybe look at writing 3 to 6, something like that for each role.
Okay.
And you want to make them SMART goals. So for anyone that's not corporate, SMART stands for it's a well-known goal setting, I guess, acronym to keep things specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. So I'm not going to go into that on the podcast because I think most people will know it. And if you don't, go and Google those acronyms and you can kind of dig in. But the clue's kind of in each of the names. The main thing is to make sure, like, how do you know you will have achieved that goal if it's done? Like, how will you know that it's done? All right. That's probably the most important element of that exercise. Clearly, it needs to be specific enough for you to know what it is you need to go and do. But the key thing for me is like the measurement element of it. If you can know whether it's been done or not, and that it's relevant enough that it links to your overarching role. So say you're at a 3 for being a father, right? I don't know. Let's say that's what I feel like, right? It's not, and I want to get to 8. Then whatever goal, I might have a goal that say, I want to read a book to my kids or be present at night time 5 times a week, 5 nights a week. Okay. That's quite a specific goal. And I have to then check myself whether, like, will that help me move from a 3 towards an 8? I'm not saying in one jump it's going to move me to an 8, but will it move me from maybe 3 to 4 or 3 to 5? Only I can put the context of what looks like an 8, right? What is success in that role? So in this process, you want to make sure that it's SMART, but the context to which, like, is it moving you significantly towards whatever that number is that you said you wanted to be for that role? That's the check. So that's what you want to be doing for question 8. Question 9 is then about distilling this down further. So we've kind of went reductive to get we went expansive to look at your life roles. Then we went reductive to make sure it fits into the wheel of life. Then we've went expansive to go into your top goals for each role. Then we've went reductive again. We want to be looking at your top 10 goals for next year. So you've got to remember, you're going to have your main role. All right. You've got your main role that you want to succeed in. So I would suggest the majority or a lot of your top 10 goals should be in that role. So if you've got, imagine like 8 different roles across the top, you might have 5 to 6 different, so this is not going to make any sense to anyone that's not watching it on YouTube, but you might have kind of across the top, all of your roles and then all your goals written underneath. I have it in a table. And then you want to be highlighting. What I do is I highlight the ones which are most important to me, that I feel in terms of making the biggest impact of me making that movement across each role. And when you're doing this, you should recognize that you've highlighted that one of the roles you're really, really focused on in the year. Therefore, if you only pick one of the goals and you've got like 7 of them written down, is that really focusing on it? Is that prioritizing that role? Probably not. So yeah, but that's the process there. Identify the top 10. And usually if I'm writing it down, I'll highlight them, or I'll kind of use some formatting on a spreadsheet if I've got it in there. But yeah, identify your top 10 goals.
So can I just ask you then, so that sounds all fantastic. Just you mentioned there that obviously if you add another goal on, it's detrimental to, another role on, it can be detrimental to the rest of the group, if you like.
Yeah.
For example, if you've got your 10 goals for the year, but then should you always pick a goal from each of the roles, or would you then leave one? So say you're a 9, being a father, would you leave that goal, or would that be detrimental?
You could do. And this is where I said about the context. You need to apply, like, how much do I want to move it?
Yeah.
Right. If you don't, like, say top 10, you've got.
I'm just imagining. So you're saying work's getting let down, so I need to really hit the work hard, do this, do that, and then all of them compound. Before you know it, that other goal of being a top father, which was 9 role, then drops to a 6 for the next year because you've been hitting it so hard with other stuff. I'm just trying to figure out that balance.
Yeah, potentially. And there is an element of plate spinning involved. So what you need to recognize is, like, how do I want to be showing up?
Yeah.
Right. And how important it is. If there's an element there as a father where you're like, look, I'm a solid 7, part of your goals might be to maintain being a 7. Or say you want to move from a 7 to an 8, you're like, well, I don't need to do too much to get there, but how do I need to sustain a 7?
Yeah, fantastic.
All right. So yeah, it's a very good point, actually. So it's not always about how much does that goal move me from where I am to where I want to be. It can be how much does that have an impact on me maintaining that number of that kind of level of where I am just now as well. And therefore that might be really important. So, showing up, making sure you're able to, say, pick and drop off the kids might be really important. Showing up at bedtime might be really important. Being present to take them to classes, being there for birthdays and things like that as well might be really important to you. So yeah, I think to answer your question, you absolutely could have a role that you recognize as an important role and not have any goals. And that's okay, as long as that fits into the context, you understand the consequences of that.
And can I ask as well, what's the psychology behind having the 10, if you like, or is that just an easy number for people to use? Because I can imagine with people, you're saying
you've answered the psychology.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like top 10, and yeah, I mean, I'd prioritize them as well. So I would say, like, I'd have them in priority order. What I do, like, every month, so I'll set this and I'll put it on a spreadsheet, and then every month we'll do a review of it and say, where are we performing against each of the goals? And there'll definitely be an element of, right, that's most important to me. So most of my action across the month and week and day should be focused on those actions. And this is probably moving into the last element, which is, it can feel great and cathartic and motivating and inspiring to set your goals and get to 9. The last question is about, right, how do you bloody go out there and do it? How do you go and achieve what you've done? So I always spend a lot of time looking at habits and mitigating barriers, like mitigating the barriers of you that might prevent you from going and achieving those goals. If I can take some time now to think, right, what will get in my way? So you're identifying things that might get in your way. And then how could you mitigate or eliminate them? So say, let's just pick a real life example. It feels a bit tenuous, but it's front of mind for me. I'm meant to have basketball training tonight. I played a basketball game last night. It was an away game, so it was on a Tuesday, but we always play, if we're playing an away game, we've got a chance to do training on the Wednesday. And we got beat last night. And part of the reason we got beat was because of a zone defense. And we need some practice to work as a team. How do we better play against a zone defense? And I say this because I'm not going to training tonight, because Jill's got an event on and I've got childcare. I say childcare, they're my kids. I've not got cover for that. But it's important to kind of recognize, like, there's a conflict there, and that's a barrier that might get in the way. So if I've got a goal about like how I want to show up as a basketball player and kind of evolve my skills as that, then I need to recognize that I'm also a father, and I've also got responsibilities, and that might be a genuine barrier that I might need to think about. So one way I might overcome that, if I had such a goal for next year, could I look to set up a regular routine with parents to have childcare support on the nights where we might potentially we might both have some work on, so that I can be at training more often than not. Yeah. And then, so that's a way of me identifying like a potential clash for somewhere, a potential barrier, and then looking at ways that I could mitigate that. The other way is looking at habits. So what habits are you doing day in, day out? Like if you've got a goal that you want to achieve in a year, you should be breaking that down to a monthly goal potentially that you're going to go and get. So you've identified your top 10 goals at this point. I'd be breaking that top goal down into smaller, like micro actions, tasks that are going to end up achieving that top 10 goal. The top 10 goal shouldn't be like I'm going to phone, like, so say in property, it might be I'm going to buy 5 property deals. Okay. That's a good, like within the year, that's a good goal. How do you go and buy those 5? There would be a whole host of different things. So I could be sending letters out. I could be looking at Rightmove. I could be phoning agents. I could be making viewings. So there's a whole host of different habits and micro actions that you could be going out to achieve that. So it's important, once you've got your lovely inspirational goals, right, we need to get reductive again and get really honest about how you're going to go, practically going to go and achieve it. So I would say out of everything, this is the most critical step, because without it, nothing's done. You've got a nice you got something that you can stick on your wall or have on a spreadsheet that looks fantastic and makes you feel good, but actually achieves sod all.
I think that's crucial, because actually when you look at the top 10 points, and obviously when you get into it, it talks around set your monthly goals to achieve your 10 goals, set your weekly goals to achieve those monthly goals. Like you're saying, focus on these roles and personal values rather than tasks. So I find that all fantastic, because you can feel that you've achieved something. You might say, I want to climb Everest by the time I'm 40, like Darren said. I'm going to climb Everest by the time I'm 40. I want to do it at a record time. Brilliant, cool. And then you walk away. It's a great goal. But what are you going to do up to that point? Because you need to actually start to build yourself up, build your stamina up, get the right kit and all this kind of stuff. If you don't have that set expectations early doors and you start to build them in early as well, you're going to fail, aren't you? And I guess that comes back to your smart habits as well, your smart goals as well, because they play a crucial part, because it all need to basically be achievable and relative to your main goal as well.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. But yeah, so that's it. I mean, that 10 questions there, 10 questions that can change your life. If you've never done that process before, it's such a great process. I've never seen anything that's come close to as comprehensive a kind of end-to-end process for goal setting before. As I said, I think like I like to dig in more into the practical element of habits and mitigating barriers maybe than what's in there. And focus a lot on values, life roles, but yeah, that's as good a book out there, and as I said, it's pretty cheap as well. So if you don't have a copy already, we'll chuck it in the show notes, and yeah, I'd absolutely urge you to pick it up.
Even talking about habits and all this kind of stuff, I mean, that's crucial, because we talk about procrastination. That's probably one of the biggest killers in people's kind of journey to become successful. You can procrastinate till tomorrow never comes. One question then, actually, because we've discussed the book and all this kind of stuff, when would you recommend doing this? Because obviously we're coming into December,
I do it now. I do it now. I do it now so that you feel like you can, like there is an element of building momentum when I see change in the 1st of January. Like it's tenuous because like really it doesn't matter. Like no one really knows it's the first. We decided it was the 1st of January, and therefore it feels emotionally to us that it's a chance for a new start, and we feel the same about weeks. But that is just the way that most of us think. So, and like use that opportunity, do the work beforehand. So if you've got some downtime between Christmas and New Year, that may be a good time. If not, try and see if you can get like a few nights to focus on this. I'm running actually a couple of workshops on goal setting at the moment as well. So I've got a session on a December session. I'm going to run a workshop largely based on the book. So on Thursday, that's Thursday the 9th and 16th. So there's two 2-hour sessions where we're going to get into we're going to tackle maybe the first 5-6 questions in the first session and then tackle the rest after. And then I'm going to have some space for reflection and get in touch with you a month after to help you hone in on, right, how are things been going? How are your goals? What habits have you had in place? What are you struggling with? So that you can help to try and maintain the goals that you've set into next year. So yeah, I'm still taking places for that as we speak. Obviously we've recorded this before this going out that week. So I think this will be going out on the 6th. So if you're interested, there should still be spaces, but if not, I'm running one in January as well on Tuesday the 4th and the 11th. So both sessions will be 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. at night. So yeah, if that's something that feels that would be of interest to you, then yeah, reach out, let me know. Just send me a DM and we can have a chat and make sure that it's the right thing for you.
That sounds fantastic. What I would say to people out there who are considering it, if you're not thinking about the December session, you're looking at the January session, definitely buy the book, read the book, have a look over it. And even if you want further reading, even Atomic Habits is probably a good book for them to read as well. I'm conscious probably not for people to feel that they're getting so much content over the holidays, it may be too much for them, but it's a good basis. But as you've heard, Darren's got great expertise in this as well. And I'm actually, like I said, I'm on page, was it 52, is it, of this just now? So I'm going to be doing this over the break as well. Yeah,
it's a really easy read. And yeah, I echo your sentiment there. Whether kind of getting some support to run through it, often we can tell ourselves that we're going to set aside time and we're going to do it, but inevitably a couple of things happen. Either we don't take that time for ourselves. So I'm giving you that opportunity to book that time out of your diary. And yeah, the other thing is kind of feeling like, oh, but what does this mean by that? See some of the things that we went into around limiting myself, how do you dig deep and be honest? Sometimes there needs to be a bit of probing and challenging, and therefore if you're sat there doing it yourself, you might not get the right output from it. So that's why I kind of run the workshops, because I think it's good to help people, to help push and prod people in a kind of gently challenging way to help them uncover the stuff which is difficult. It feels difficult to go through, but it's so important in terms of making the changes to create the life that you actually want. So yeah, but if you do nothing else, like genuinely buy the book. Like it's the price of a cup of coffee at the moment. So yeah,
yep.
I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I echo Darren's views. I bought the book second hand. Buy most of the books second hand. It was a couple of bucks. It's cheaper than coffee. So get out there, reach out, speak to Darren, pick yourself in that course as well. It'll be fantastic because you feed off the energy of other people and you learn off other people as well. So but no, Darren, thank you very much. I'm really excited to look through the book and actually do my own little mini workshop over the holidays. I just need to book my wife in as well. Interesting one. But no,
ask her if she's free. If she's free on the 9th and 16th, then get her along.
I certainly will. I mean, I'm looking forward to it because we normally shut up shop in December and have a bit of downtime and kind of catch up with each other and start to plan for the next year as well. So that's fantastic. Good times. But no, thank you very much for jumping on the podcast, talking about this. I know it's slightly different for most of our listeners, but I thought it was very important for us all to listen to it, especially since I've started reading the book and I can get a bit of an insight as well.
Yeah, good stuff. Thanks, Chris.
No worries. Cheers. Thank you. As always, thank you so much for listening to the Pop Pod this week. If you'd like to leave a review or share the podcast with others, then that'd be awesome. You'll find us on Instagram at the Pop Pod, and on Facebook we have a community group called Purpose to Progress that anyone can join. And we'll be back every Monday with a new episode, but until then, stay on purpose and we'll see you next week.